How is it going, everybody? Welcome to the newly rebranded Real Tales podcast. I am so excited for the future of this podcast. It's already been 12 episodes. I think this is episode 13, actually. Who's counting? I don't know. There's going to be a whole bunch more coming in the next couple weeks, next couple months, next couple years and beyond. So I am really, really excited for the trajectory of this podcast. And thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you guys so much for the support. Our last podcast that we had with Tony Ramirez went absolutely crazy on Facebook. So I appreciate all the love on that podcast. If you guys haven't watched it, please go back and watch it. It was an absolutely amazing interview with a young stud here in Toledo that is making some serious money. So I definitely would tune into that podcast. And this podcast here is going to be just a solo episode, just with myself. And it is going to be about the things that we do in our business, whether that be when we're already in contract with a seller on a property, or even after we've closed on a property, or before we close on or get a property under contract. The things that we do, subtle things that destroy our deals, right? I don't know if you guys have been guilty of this. I know that I sure as hell have. Right, of me doing things that I should not have during a deal out of ignorance that would end up completely destroying my deal, and it ends up being a unpleasant time. So that's what I'm here to hopefully help you avoid. Right, so I wrote down 4 things that will destroy your deals, and we're just going to go through them one by one, explain them in depth, and hopefully you guys avoid these traps, because trust me, they're easy to fall into, and I want to make sure that you guys have as many successful deals as possible. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. And the first thing I wrote down here, and I wrote down this word with 3 exclamation points after it. I wrote the word time. Time kills all deals, guys. I'm gonna say that again. Time kills all deals, and in every single facet of the word and of a situation in a deal, right? Whether that is before you get it under contract, that's during your escrow period, even after you close on a property, whether that's be even a wholesale or a fix and flip or a buy and hold, right? Time kills all deals. Let me explain. All right. Let me explain the first part I mentioned, right? Which is once you or before you lock up the deal, you taking too long to lock up a deal under contract. I see this happen a lot with people that buy direct from wholesaler, people that buy direct to seller, people that buy even direct to agent, right? People that take too long to make decisions is one facet of the situation, and the more common one, which I see a lot, and something that the one that I've been guilty of the most, is not being able to essentially close the deal in a timely manner. And this can happen for a multitude of reasons. And this podcast is not going to be a detailed look into the sales psychology of a seller or an agent or wholesaler. If you guys want to see a podcast about that, we can do a whole separate video on that. But for today, I just want to focus on the fact that you guys need to have, especially if you're going direct to seller, guys, especially if you're going direct to seller, you need a proven and predictable sales process to be able to get a qualified lead from A to B, right? From a lead to a signed contract, and as quickly and as effectively as possible, right? Guys, if you guys are going direct to seller, you guys know that these leads cost money, whether it is you're doing it through cold calling or direct mail or PPC. All of these cost money, right? So when you have that qualified lead in front of you, you want to be able to make sure you can close every closable deal, right? That's what we're in business for, right? We're here to buy properties. We're here to wholesale houses, whatever the case may be, whatever your business model is. At the end of the day, once you guys get that lead, you guys know what time it is. You have to get it to a signed contract. So where a lot of investors drop the ball is their sales process. They don't have a proven sales process where they can effectively get that deal from A to B, which then leads to them taking a whole bunch of time to get this property under contract. While in that meantime, where it could have took you, let's just say, for example, right? Let's say it could have taken you a day to get a property under contract, right? Let's say you're doing PPC, right? lead comes in, you guys have a conversation, you guys have identified it as a quality lead, you guys can possibly lock it up today. If you guys go out there and see it, or if you guys are going over the phone, you guys can lock it up virtually. But let's just say if you don't have a proven sales process and you guys don't know what to do when you guys are having a conversation with the seller, you guys can drag that process on. Instead of a day, it can be 2 days, 3 days, a week before you guys can actually get that deal under contract when you could have closed it in a day. Now let's look at the reality of things. Let's just go back to the PPC example. If a lead came into through PPC, guess what else that lead is probably doing? Calling other people that are advertising online. So in the meantime, while you're taking all this time to close the deal, this excess time to close the deal, they're calling a bunch of other companies, maybe calling a bunch of other realtors as well. People that are going to compete with you to get this deal. And you guys will have a decreased chance of getting this deal under contract because, number one, you have competition. Two, with all this increased time, they maybe change their mind. Maybe they're going to go with another solution. Maybe they're going to fix the house up themselves. Maybe they want to hire a realtor or turn it into a rental, whatever the case may be. If you guys are direct to seller, you guys understand that sellers change their mind sometimes. So all that time that you guys allow them to do that is time that you're taking away from getting more locked up deals. So I will say that on the I guess let's just say the A to B part of a sales process, right? Which is getting a lead and turning it into a signed contract. All right. Now let's look at another situation that's also not as common, but pretty common. Something that we've done a lot just to make sure that we can lock up as many deals as we can is sometimes we'll extend our escrow period for, instead of the traditional 30 days, we'll do 60, 90 days, right? So let's just say you're in a 90-day escrow period, right? Let's say you signed a contract with the seller in January and you guys are closing all the way in March, right? That is a long, long time. And that is a time where you guys can have a lot of things happen. And what a lot of people do in these 3 months is they totally drop the ball in communication with the seller. And that is the absolute wrong thing to do, guys. Do not do that. Once you guys have a deal under contract, and it's a long escrow period, even if it's not, I mean, this is just should be a common practice, is consistent following up and communication with these sellers or with your wholesaler or with their agent, whoever you're buying your deal from, right? There needs to be a lot of communication at least every week to make sure that, number one, you stay on their mind, especially if it's a seller, right? Because sellers, they have a whole bunch of stuff going on. They're not necessarily in the real estate world, right? Where they, maybe they keep track of things. Sellers, they have their own life, they have their own job, they have their own family. They have a completely different life, right? So especially if you're dealing with a motivated seller, a lot of these people have a lot of things going on in their lives right now. And they don't really have, especially if it's a long escrow process, the mental headspace, I guess you could say, to remember everything about the deal. So you want to be the person that's proactive and making sure that they are still, how would you say this? I guess just making sure that you follow up with your seller to make sure that they remember you, they remember the transaction, and that they know that you're still alive. That way they don't think that this is just some some loose agreement that they can back out of at any time and there's going to be no repercussions, right? So that's one thing. So that's what I had for time. Just making sure, I guess, to wrap up our first topic, to make sure that, number one, you are communicating, like we last said, with your sellers as clearly and as effectively as possible, especially during long escrow period, and even before that, making sure that you're just communicating and making sure everything is clear, and then also making sure, very importantly, that when you guys have a qualified lead in front of you, you guys know how to convert them. And if you guys want to see a video on that, please let me know. Please reach out to me. We in our company, we go very, very deep into sales psychology and understanding the mind of a seller, making sure that we can close every closable deal that comes into our business. So if you guys want to hear what we talk about behind the scenes, then please just let me know. I'll be more than happy to drop a video on that. But on to the next thing. And this one, if this is going to Facebook, this is probably going to piss a lot of people off, but things have to be said. I want to make sure that nobody has to fall victim to circumstances like this in the future, and that is dealing with bad buyers, guys. As a wholesaler, right, somebody that sells a lot of our deals off market to our investors. Some of our investors that we've had in the past have seriously dropped the ball and have really hurt our deals. And that's for a multitude of reasons. Number one, and these are just, I'm just gonna give you guys kind of like a checklist here of things to look out for while you're in a transaction with a buyer to know whether this buyer is legit or if they're just trying to snake you, right? Or just trying to waste your time. Because that's probably the number one most critical thing that you want to avoid, right? Especially if you're wholesaling, right? Because once you have a buyer under contract, you're assuming it's going to be closing. So you may hang tight for a week just to find out that your buyer is not going to close on your property, and then you just lost a week of your escrow period, and then you got to go make up that time and go find another buyer. So I don't want you guys being in that situation. First thing that I make sure when you have a buyer is that they deposit EMD, non-negotiable, guys, non-negotiable. I've been victim of slacking on this and kind of letting my buyers slide with not having EMD submitted to title directly. And this has taken a serious toll in a lot of our transactions, right? Where for example, since they're not depositing EMD, they have no skin in the game. And a combination of some other things that we're going to be talking about here shortly should have been 30-day close, ends up being 60, 90 days. And there's no skin in the game, so they're not really held accountable to them taking that long of a time to get the deal done. And that's not what you want to have to happen, because let's say you're a wholesaler, you're a realtor, and you're facing the seller, and you're dealing with the seller asking you, hey, when's this going to close? When's this going to close? Just as a service provider, you don't want to be somebody that promised a 30-day close, and then it ends up being twice or three times as long, right? That's going to cause a lot of headache for your seller. That's going to cause a lot of headache for you managing that transaction, while you have a buyer that is just dropping the ball on you. And then the next thing that I wrote down as well is they don't have their funding prepared. Guys, make sure that when you have a buyer, before you sell them a deal, you understand how they're going to be purchasing this property, whether that's going to be straight cash, whether that's going to be through a hard money loan, private money loan, if they have a funding partner, whatever the case may be. You want to figure out what their plan is to purchase this property, especially if they're not using just straight cash and they're getting hard money or they're getting private money. You want to know if they have their funding, their lender or their partner in place already to be able to fund this deal. I have had some of my worst transactions happen, and I have some stories to tell about this, where we had a deal where the buyer that we had assigned it to did not have funding in place, and ended up taking 3 months for this buyer to close on what should have been a 30-day close. So once this buyer bought this property from us, so we made a lot of mistakes, right? We didn't have EMD in place. We were just kind of, we formed a relationship. The guy bought properties, and we decided, hey, we just want to sell them the deal. So we sold him the deal, and he had no funding prepared, right? So we didn't know where he was going to get his hard money from. You know, where he's going to get his rehab budget from. And this was a very extensive rehab. This was 2 properties that were complete full rehabs. So these required substantial amounts of rehab. So he had no preparation for finding a lender or a partner to partner up with for the rehab. None of the stuff was in place. And don't get me wrong, if a buyer uses hard money or private money, that's absolutely fantastic. We invite that. We absolutely love hard money lenders and what they provide. So I'm not saying that if a buyer is using hard money that you should not sell the deal to them. Quite the opposite. I think that those are great buyers. They can usually close really quickly, and they usually buy a lot of properties. That's why they're using hard money, right? But if they're claiming to use hard money or private money or just other people's money, and they don't know where they're going to get that money, they haven't identified a source, they don't have a go-to lender or a go-to private lender to give them the funds, then that should throw off red flags. Because if they're real buyers and they really have bought properties in the past, or they're at least preparing to buy properties, and this is maybe their first one that they're buying, they should at the bare minimum have a lender in place that's going to help them with getting the purchase done. I mean, just put yourselves in the shoes of a buyer. A lot of you guys are buyers that are watching this, right? If you guys are starting to buy properties and you guys don't have a place of funding, or a place where you'll get funding, right? That's a red flag. So you guys need to understand that, right? When you guys are selling these deals to investors, that you guys need to understand where they're getting their funds. So that's a really big one, and make sure you guys get that up front. That way, you guys don't get into contract and you guys have to extend closing because your buyer is still trying to find money. And if they are using hard money, guys, even if they have an identified hard money lender, you still want to follow up with them on a weekly basis, just checking up with them, just saying, hey, how's your hard money going? Is everything good? Just make sure that you're in communication with them and make sure that their lender isn't dropping the ball as well, because there are some lenders that take longer than others, that aren't as efficient as others. So you definitely want to make sure that their lender is also not dropping the ball, and make sure that you're in communication with them while they're getting their hard money. All right, the next thing I wrote down as far as bad buyers is bad communication. If you've noticed, all of these kind of kind of combine together and come into play together, right? Because no communication kind of it kind of goes with the first 2 points that I made, right? Buyers that don't communicate. I had a buyer once on a deal where we were supposed to close on whatever date, and at that week of closing, at the week of closing, number one, we were not able to close for one of the reasons that I had previously mentioned, was one of the reasons, and then number two, he ghosted me. And I heard nothing from him, and it was the week of closing, and I heard nothing. And long story short, we had to end up taking that property down ourselves because of the the amount of time we extended to close this deal, and where my seller is at, and where my seller did not want to keep going with giving this buyer more time, right? They wanted to close quick. This buyer was not responding, so we had to take it into our own hands and just take down the property ourselves when we originally planned to wholesale it. So that is a huge red flag, right? And you'll be able to sniff those buyers out pretty quickly, right? Let's say if a buyer is not depositing you EMD, or if they don't have funding prepared. A lot of times they're also not going to have good communication with you as well, because you're going to keep asking them questions that they don't have answers for, and they will just simply not respond. So you want to make sure that you're in constant communication with them. If they're not giving you daily communication, at least responding to on a daily basis from when you're reaching out to them, red flag, right? If they're taking 2-3 days to respond to you, I think you should just cut that deal off or address it immediately, or you're going to run into some huge problems when it comes time to close. And then the fourth one, I think I've kind of already talked about this a lot on this topic, but they can't close on time, right? I think this kind of is also a combination of the last three things that we also talked about. If you can't tell, all four of these kind of go hand in hand, but yeah, they can't close on time, right? Maybe they don't have their funding prepared. Maybe they're not communicating with you. And let's say the time of closing comes, they're not ready or they're not responding. Your closing is going to get delayed, and you're not going to be able to close on time. You're going to have to find something to say to your seller, or else they're going to be really pissed. And you don't want that to happen. So make sure that you guys take this into your own hands, and make sure that the people that you're dealing with are on your side, and make sure that they're going to get this deal done for the seller as quickly and easily as possible. So that's what we have for bad buyers. Now, this next one we see happen a lot. This is something that I'm guilty of. It is something I feel like I'm still guilty of, but it's something that we, especially wholesalers, we really need to get together and make sure that we minimize this mistake as much as possible. All right. So this is one thing that will destroy your deal, is running your numbers wrong. I think this is kind of an easy to talk about topic. I feel like there's not really much to say that hasn't already been said. Running your numbers wrong, and that could be running your ARV wrong. Maybe your formula is wrong. Maybe you're inflating your formulas. Maybe you're seriously underestimating the rehab budget that's going to have to be put into this property. There's a lot of things that can go here. And my best advice is to number one, learn from your mistakes, right? Because this is a mistake, right? But this is something that you guys can learn from. All right. So let's just say you're a new wholesaler. Or let's just say you've been doing deals for a while, right? And let's just say one time you maybe you got your ARV wrong at looking at some comps. Learn from the mistake, and then just don't do it again. It's very, very simple. Take mental note of it and make sure that it doesn't happen again. Now, as a wholesaler, I completely sympathize with the fact that you guys are trying to sell the potential of a deal, right? So maybe it's in its potential that maybe some buyers that can't see. I totally understand that, and I totally agree with that, and I think that's how the business should be. Right, but at the same time, there's what's realistic and there's what's unrealistic, right? If you're trying to sell a deal that needs $50K of rehab for 20,000 just under ARV, and you're claiming that it needs $5,000 worth of repairs, that's a huge problem. You don't do that. That's running your numbers wrong. And if you're new, I totally understand that maybe the first couple times you comp a property, your numbers may be off a little bit. Here's my advice: talk to somebody. Talk to somebody. Get familiar with somebody that's in your market that's doing deals. Whether they're another wholesaler, maybe they're a direct buyer, a realtor. It doesn't really matter. Just somebody that knows the market and has comped properties extensively before, and just run your deals by them. Make sure that, hey, is this a good deal? And then they'll be able to tell you, like, yeah, your ARV is right, your repair costs are right, or they'll say, no, actually your ARV is actually a bit inflated. I actually think this rehab is going to be about $70,000 instead of $30,000. So I would change your numbers, right? Get that feedback in the beginning. That way you can learn the lesson without the scar, and making sure that when you're delivering deals to buyers, they are actually good deals and that they're not very, very inflated. So make sure that at least if that happens, that you learn from it. And next thing I have written down is not being upfront with everyone. Again, something that a lot of people are guilty of, even with the best intentions, right? Especially when people are wholesaling, they have this notion that they can't be upfront with the seller, that they have the ability to assign the property. Guys, I am 100% for talking to your seller before they sign the agreement and letting them know that you have a right to assign this property, right? Also have to understand that you have other exit strategies too, right? Let's say you're a buyer as well. You can also buy this property, right? But understand and have it in your contract that this contract can be assigned. That is very, very important, and it's very, very important to be upfront with your sellers and have them understand that. Because let's just say if you guys are getting close to that closing time and you guys have not disclosed that you have an assignment clause in your agreement, or that you guys are able to assign this agreement, there's going to be a lot of trouble, right? There can be a lot of trouble, I should say. Right? We've had deals where in the beginning, we had an assignment, I guess, clause, but we never really disclosed what it meant. I'm guilty of that as well. In my very early journey, a couple years ago, I did that, guys. Yes, and it sometimes backfired. We never lost a deal because of it. We eventually just had to just let them know what that clause was when we chose to assign a deal. But I've heard stories of people actually losing deals because they didn't tell the seller that they were going to be assigning the contract. So you guys don't want to be in that situation. Be upfront. Make sure you guys have an assignment clause in your agreements. And before you get a property under contract with the seller, make sure you guys are looking through that contract with them together and going through every single paragraph and explaining it to them to make sure that they have a clear understanding of what they're getting into and have an assignment clause in your contracts. That way they can read that, they can ask questions about that, and you'll be able to answer it and make sure that they're comfortable with you doing that if you do decide to do that. The last thing I wrote down was not using your due diligence period. This goes a lot of times for buyers instead of wholesalers. I think wholesalers have been guilty of doing this, as have I in the past. Not using a due diligence period. So let me tell you a quick backstory. I had a deal where it was a duplex that we were purchasing, and we decided that you know what, this is when we were just starting getting into flips, and we thought, yeah, you know what, we've seen hundreds of properties before. We don't really need to get our contractor in here and do this, right? It was a quick closing timeline, so we decided that we just not really use our due diligence period, even though we had it, and just move straight on with the closing. Fast forward a little bit, we end up closing on that property. We end up walking it again. And turns out that there was major foundation damage in that property, and that ended up costing us a lot of money and ended up turning our deal upside down. So to avoid that, guys, make sure you guys use your due diligence period. It is there to help you. It is there to make sure that you're not making bad decisions and buying bad deals that will lose you money. Please use your due diligence period. Wholesalers, if you guys have a 14-day or 10-day due diligence period, make sure you use it to your maximum ability. Right? Make sure you guys are getting as detailed insight and pictures and video of the property as possible. Make sure that you put it in front of every qualified buyer's face. That way they know that you have this deal. That way you can sell it for the highest amount of money. Get the largest assignment fee that you can. Right? Make sure that you actually use your due diligence period. And especially if you're wholesaling and you have a deal that's kind of like on the fence after you get it under contract, you find out, hey, maybe my rehab is higher than expected. Maybe my ARV is a bit higher. You want to use the rest of your due diligence period to make sure that you put it in front of as much buyers as possible. That way you can get as much feedback as possible. That way you can go back and renegotiate with your seller if you have to, right? Or maybe you ended up just finding a buyer that you can assign it to, right? Especially if you have a small buyers list. If you only have a buyers list that's like 50 to 100 people, you're not putting it in front of as much people as you really need to. You really need to expand your buyers list. So use that time, use that due diligence period. Geez, say that 5 times fast. Use your due diligence period to make sure that you can put it, if you're wholesaling it, in front of as many buyers as possible. That way you can sell your deals for the highest amount of money. That way you get paid the most. So that is about all that I have for today's video, guys. Don't do any of these mistakes. Again, I just want to preface this, guys. These are very, very simple to avoid. I think at the end of the day, if you guys just value and internalize the importance of good communication, timely communication, and being upfront with everybody, and making sure that you use all the resources you have in a transaction as possible, and make sure that you use them to the best of your ability, you will avoid these mistakes, right? If time is killing all your deals and you're taking too long to lock up contracts, or losing deals in escrow because of poor communication, then there's something you can do about that, right? If you just communicate more and have a more effective sales process, that way you can close every closable deal. But if you have bad buyers that you're dealing with, you need to communicate that and understand that there's certain there's a certain threshold, certain line that if you cross that, the deal is done. If you're running your numbers wrong, guys, learn it and move on. Learn it and move on. If you guys are not being upfront with everybody, just check yourself and your core values and make sure that you really understand the importance of that, and understand that if you want to be in this business for a long time and have a lot of success in it, you want to make sure you communicate with everybody. You don't give yourself a bad rep of being disingenuous. And then not using due diligence period. Guys, that's a silly mistake. I have fell for it in the past, right? But if I have a due diligence period, I will use it, and I will make sure that I make the most of it. That way, when I walk into a deal, I know what to expect and I know how to come up on top on it and make sure that I make the most money that I can when I have a deal in my hands. So that is about all I have for today's video, guys. Thank you so much for watching this, guys. I really appreciate all the love that we have so far on this podcast, and look forward for more episodes. We're going to pour a lot into this podcast to make it the best real estate investing podcast in the world. We're going to have so many amazing guests. We're going to have so many amazing things happening around this podcast, guys. If you guys have not already, please make sure that you follow me here on Facebook and Instagram, and also on TikTok as well. All of those links will be in the description of this video, of this podcast. Make sure you guys follow me there, see the shortened up clips of these podcasts in case you guys don't want to watch 30 minutes to an hour of a podcast. Cool. We have 30 second to a minute clips that you guys can watch. Have fun with those. And that's going to be about it, guys. Again, thank you guys so much, and see you guys next time.